Pope Leo XIV celebrated the first Mass of his papacy today at the Vatican's Sistine Chapel, and Transportation Secretary Duffy has unveiled a sweeping plan to modernize U.S. air traffic control. Good morning, I'm Corva Coleman from NPR News, and here are today's top stories. Pope Leo XIV has celebrated the first Mass of his papacy today at the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican. The new pope is an American. The former Robert Prevost was born in Chicago. He was close to the late Pope Francis and is expected to echo similar themes to Francis's, such as care for the poor and advocacy for migrants. But NPR's Jason DeRose says Pope Leo also faces criticism from earlier in his ministry.
Survivors of clergy sexual abuse say Cardinal Prevost did not do enough to address the issue as a bishop or archbishop or cardinal. That's true of many in church leadership. Now the question is how he'll respond to victims going forward. He's also come under criticism for comments on LGBTQ people. Back in 2012, he lamented what he called the culture's sympathy with, quote, the homosexual lifestyle.
NPR's Jason DeRose reporting from Rome. The U.S. Supreme Court says that former Justice David Souter has died at the age of 85. Souter was appointed by former President George H.W. Bush in 1990 and won Republican backing. But Souter surprised many by often siding with liberal justices. Souter retired in 2009. The Trump administration has officially granted more than 50 white South Africans refugee status in the U.S. Kate Bartlett reports from Johannesburg. The Afrikaners are expected to land in the U.S. next week.
The group of white South Africans could arrive at Dulles Airport as early as Monday, three sources with knowledge of the matter told NPR, which has also seen an email confirming the arrangements. The sources all work for the U.S. government, so did not want to be named out of fear of retribution. This comes just 3 months after President Trump signed an executive order claiming Afrikaners face persecution in South Africa and could apply for refugee status in the United States. Afrikaners are the descendants of mainly Dutch colonists. The South African government says there is no evidence they are being persecuted and has accused the U.S. administration of being taken in by disinformation. For NPR News, I'm Kate Bartlett in Johannesburg.
Homeland Security Secretary Noem says that the migrant illegally deported to El Salvador in March will not be coming back to the U.S. Noem spoke to a Senate panel yesterday about the case of Kilmer Abrego Garcia. The U.S. Supreme Court has told the Trump administration to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return. Maryland Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen questioned Noem about his case.
Simple question. Are you taking any action to facilitate his return, or are you not?
This administration is following and complying with all federal court orders to make sure that we...
So you are, because the court ordered that you facilitate his return. So you are facilitating his return.
Sir, Senator, thank you for the question. But what I would tell you is that we are following court orders and that your advocacy for a known terrorist is alarming to me.
Madam Secretary...
It's alarming to me because he's a human smuggler.
Madam Secretary, I'm going to have to reclaim it.
And a terrorist, and he's not a U.S. citizen.
Democrats say the issue is not about citizenship. It's that Abrego Garcia was denied due process as required by the Constitution. President Trump has fired the Librarian of Congress, Carla Hayden. Hayden is the first woman and the first Black American to serve as the nation's top librarian. Transportation Secretary Duffy has unveiled a sweeping plan to modernize U.S. air traffic control. NPR's Scott Newman reports that includes upgrading tracking systems, putting in new ground radar, and revamping the flight management system.
At a news conference with airline CEOs and the heads of the FAA and NTSB, Duffy cited January's deadly mid-air collision in D.C. and recent problems at Newark Airport as urgent reasons for action. He said President Trump is committed to solving the problem once and for all.
He doesn't want to take this problem and pass it to the next administration, to the next secretary, to a next set of victims.
He didn't give a price tag, but said with full funding from Congress, the overhaul could be done in 3 to 4 years. Scott Newman, NPR News, Washington.
President Trump is appointing Fox News host and former judge and prosecutor Jeanine Pirro as the interim U.S. attorney for Washington, D.C. As NPR's Elena Moore reports, the president announced the move after pulling the nomination of his first choice for the job, Ed Martin.
In a post on social media, Trump praises Pirro and says she's, quote, incredibly well qualified for this position. Jeanine Pirro previously served as district attorney of Westchester County in New York, but she left that job 20 years ago. Since then, she's become a prominent face on Fox News and other conservative media. She has a record as a fierce defender of Trump, and notably, she promoted false claims about the 2020 presidential election. It's unclear when the Senate will consider Pirro's nomination to be interim U.S. attorney for the nation's capital. Elena Moore, NPR News.
Today, Russia is marking the 80th anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. But the events are deeply intertwined with Russia's current war in Ukraine. NPR's Charles Maines has more from Moscow.
Victory Day is Russia's most solemn holiday, a moment when the country pays respect to the more than 20 million Soviets who died fighting Hitler's armies. More controversially, Russian President Vladimir Putin has drawn comparisons between that sacrifice and what he frames as a war against neo-fascism in modern-day Ukraine. Western powers, many of them Soviet allies 80 years ago, reject that narrative and are skipping the Moscow event. Chinese President Xi Jinping headlines a group of 29 mostly autocratic leaders joining Putin on Red Square for a Soviet-style military parade. Charles Maines, NPR News, Moscow.
I'm Corva Coleman, NPR News in Washington.